Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a really intense piece of source material. It kicks off with a pretty startling claim that Israel is, quote, desperately trying to downplay the devastating destruction that Iranian missiles have wrought upon the Zionist state. So our mission here is to unpack this very specific and, let's be clear, highly opinionated viewpoint. It comes from a YouTube transcript titled, Israel Hides Damage from Devastating Iranian Missile Attacks. We're basically navigating the narrative and the very strong claims made in this one source.
That's absolutely the key framing for today.
Yeah,
it's vital. We acknowledge right off the bat, this source presents a deeply critical, even accusatory perspective on what's been happening between Israel and Iran.
definitely accusatory.
All right, so our job here, as always, is to present impartially what the source claims. That includes its specific language, its arguments. We're not, endorsing it or bringing in outside facts. This is purely about understanding the detailed perspective shared in this particular piece of content, which you, the listener, brought to our attention. It's really an exercise in dissecting a specific narrative.
And it is quite a narrative. It starts, interestingly, by introducing the German word schadenfreude, defines it as, taking great pleasure from another person's misfortune. And then it just flat out states that hardly anything has brought the author more joy than watching Israelis take to social media to complain about being bombed.
Wow. That really sets a tone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Starting with schadenfreude, it immediately establishes this very strong emotional foundation for everything that follows.
Yeah.
And it positions all the subsequent claims within this framework of what the source itself calls karmic justice or righteous vengeance. It even claims this has gone a long way to restoring our faith in humanity and our hope for ultimate justice. Strong words.
Very strong. So how does the source connect this idea of justice to the actual conflict? What's the link they're making?
Well, it explicitly links this justice to a claim that 82% of Israelis celebrate the genocide that has taken place in their name for the past 21 months. It goes on to give figures, resulting in the slaughter of upwards of 100,000 Palestinians, 75% of whom were women and children.
Okay, so very specific, very high numbers presented there.
Exactly. And the narrative then alleges Israelis turned a genocide into a major tourism attraction, enjoying picnics and take selfies while Palestinians are incinerated and starved to death in the background. And crucially, to set the stage, the source attributes the entire recent escalation to Israel having started an unprovoked war against Iran. So it's assigning blame very directly from the get-go.
Okay. So with that highly charged framing setup, the source then seems to shift gears, moves into detailing the supposed success of the Iranian attacks and what it calls Israeli failure.
Precisely.
It asserts that Iranian ballistic and hypersonic missiles slammed into Tel Aviv. States point blank, Israeli cities are on fire. And even underlines it, saying, this is not Gaza, this is downtown Tel Aviv.
Yeah, this is where the source transitions, you could say, from the sort of emotional framing to making these very specific, potentially verifiable or, disputable claims about military events.
Right.
The account insists that Israel is desperate to keep hidden from the world what it calls the magnitude of Iran's counterattack. And a really significant claim it makes is about the air defenses. It says Israel's much-vaunted Iron Dome air defense system completely failed against Iran's third wave of attack on Sunday evening.
Completely failed.
That's the claim, describing Iranian missiles moving freely over Israeli airspace to reach their targets.
And it gets even more specific about where these missiles supposedly hit. This account points to an Iranian missile completely destroying a missile interceptor at Israel's Nevada air base. It even says, boom, a direct hit. It's gone.
Very graphic language.
Yeah. Then it claims a ballistic missile slammed into Israel's equivalent of the Pentagon, the Ministry of Defense building, calling this a direct hit that Zionist-controlled media outlets refused to report, with the apparent exception of Fox News, according to the source.
Very interesting exception cited there.
It is. The source also mentions devastating impact in Ramat Gan City, claims hypersonic missiles took out a major oil refinery depot in Haifa, leaving a scene of utter devastation. And back in Tel Aviv, it just describes missiles slamming into Israeli targets with relative ease. It's striking how definitive these claims are.
Absolutely. The source really leans on these specific alleged incidents to build its case for widespread destruction and a collapse of Israeli defenses. And this naturally leads into another major theme in the source's narrative. Its direct challenge to mainstream reporting especially when it comes to casualties.
Okay, how so?
Well, this account disputes Israel's official claim of, quote, only 8 Israelis killed. It states flatly that way more Israelis have been killed, with dozens, possibly hundreds or even thousands, buried or trapped beneath rubble.
Wow, hundreds or thousands. That's a huge discrepancy.
It is, and it immediately draws that very deliberate parallel, saying this mirrors the situation of more than 10,000 Palestinians who remain buried under the rubble of their own homes in Gaza.
Ah, okay, so that juxtaposition again. And the source also brings up something about an Israeli spokesperson.
Yes, it highlights what it calls an irony lost on Netanyahu's official spokesperson, who, according to this transcript, complained about Israelis being targeted in their sleep. And the source contrasts this sharply, claiming that 50% of all Palestinians killed in Gaza during the past week were killed while sleeping in tents, as others are murdered while lining up for food and humanitarian aid. It really hammers that comparison.
Yeah, you can see the pattern. Strong contrast, direct parallels.
Definitely. And this narrative then sort of tries to bolster Iran's position. It asserts their targeting was military, not civilian. And then it uses this strong rhetorical technique.
What's that?
It states explicitly that Iran is not deliberately targeting civilians, and then adds that this is something even the Israeli military acknowledges to be true, claiming they said 90% of Iran's missiles are fired at Israeli military sites.
Huh. Okay, so citing the Israeli military itself, allegedly.
Allegedly, yes, that's what the source claims. And right after that, it makes this sweeping accusation. Every Zionist accusation is a confession of wrongdoing.
Whoa.
Yeah. And the specific example given is the claim that Israel falsely accused Hamas of hiding beneath hospitals in Gaza. Well, the source alleges Israeli soldiers construct a new military command base underneath Tel Aviv's Ichilov hospital.
So a direct counter-accusation using the same theme.
Yeah.
Okay. What about bigger picture stuff, strategic implications?
Right. The source moves into that as well. It claims Israel is running out of interceptor missiles for its Iron Dome air defense system.
Running out.
That's the claim. And it adds that U.S. officials are supposedly worried that further retaliation from Iran will drain the U.S. global missile stockpile to a horrendous level.
Okay, so painting a picture of resource strain, both for Israel and the U.S., according to this account. What does it say about, like, ordinary people in Israel?
Yeah, after establishing the alleged military and resource issues, the narrative shifts to the supposed impact on the population. It claims that ordinary Israelis are now fleeing the Jewish state in record numbers.
Fleeing in record numbers, that sounds significant.
It would be, if accurate. The source claims this led to the Israeli government actually banning its citizens from leaving by air.
Banning people from leaving, okay.
Again, a very strong claim suggesting internal panic or control used by the source to emphasize instability.
And there was something else, too, wasn't there, about escaping?
Yes, this count adds another layer, claiming Israelis are paying thousands of dollars to escape Israel by small yachts from the port cities of Haifa and Ashkelon. Sort of reinforces that image of desperation of people trying to get out however they can.
Right. So it paints a picture of internal collapse, almost.
That seems to be the intent of that part of the narrative. And then the transcript wraps up with a very serious prediction or allegation about potential future actions.
Okay, what's that?
It talks about a heightened probability that Israel will carry out a false flag attack to drag the United States into its war.
A false flag attack? Why does the source think that?
The reasoning given in the source is that Israel cannot defeat Iran on its own, that it lacks the capability to hit Iran where it counts deep inside its mountain fortresses, or to destroy its uranium enrichment capabilities, capabilities which, the source states, can only be reached with U.S. buster bombs.
So the argument is, Israel can't win alone, needs the U.S., and might use a false flag to get them involved. How does the source back this up? It's a huge claim.
It is. The source quotes former President Trump's supposed stance that the U.S. won't get actively involved in Israel's war unless Iran targets Americans. That's presented as the motive, essentially create a situation where Americans are targeted.
Okay.
And then, to support the idea that Israel would do such a thing, the source draws on history, or at least its interpretation of history. It says Israel has a proven history of dragging the U.S. into its wars via false flag attacks.
A proven history? What example do they give?
They specifically allege that Israel bombed a U.S. naval ship, killing 34 American sailors, in 1967 in an effort to expand its wars of choice against Arab states that same year. They're referring, presumably, to the USS Liberty incident, presenting it very definitively as a deliberate, Israeli false flag attack.
Right, a very controversial historical event presented here as proof of concept for a future false flag.
Exactly. That's the final heavy claim the source leaves us with.
Okay, so let's recap for you, the listener. We've just walked through a really extraordinary and frankly highly contentious set of claims from this one particular source. Everything from assertions of massive hidden damage to this narrative of karmic justice, specific claims about Iron Dome failing, missiles hitting key targets, then the contrasting casualty figures, the arguments about civilian targeting, right through to theories about an exodus and potential false flag operations involving the U.S. It's a lot.
It really is. And just to reiterate, this deep dive was really designed to help you fully understand the very specific, very intense viewpoint presented in this single piece of source material. It's a powerful example of how narratives get constructed in these highly charged situations, isn't it? Using strong emotion, alleged specific details, counterclaims.
Absolutely. It offers a perspective that's dramatically different from many mainstream accounts.
For sure.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Given this source's constant claims about information being desperately kept hidden, about media outlets refusing to report things, what does digging into one, let's say, highly opinionated account like this suggest about the challenge we all face in trying to figure out the full picture of complex world events?
Yeah, that's the core question, isn't it?
And maybe how might you, listening now, approach evaluating sources that make such strong, sometimes sensational claims, and that explicitly set themselves against more common narratives? Something to think about as you do your own deep dives into the information landscape out there.